All right, everyone, welcome to Building Your Perfect Quantum Plate. I'm Sarah, and I've got my friend, co-host, coach here, Becky. She's going to be helping in the chat, and she also helps me run my group. And so she's kind of my right-hand woman. She'll be watching the chat while we go through this. And I'm just going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. And when we send out the replay, you'll also get a copy of these slides so that you have a copy of them yourself. Let me go ahead and share my screen. There it is. Okay, here we go. All right, so just a quick disclaimer. Obviously, this is just for education, informational purposes. It's not medical advice. And you should always consult with medical doctor with anything healthcare related. So just a little disclaimer that this is just for educational purposes only. Now, let's talk about what we're going to cover in the webinar today. I'm going to talk about why people have weight loss stalls, weight loss resistance, why things like keto, fasting, calorie restriction can often backfire, because I think there's a lot of confusion around those topics. Why keto is not bad and fasting isn't bad and calorie restriction isn't bad, but they can backfire, and how that happens. The role of circadian rhythm, light, and seasonality, and how that actually plays into your metabolism, why your terrain matters, what that actually is, as much as the actual diet that you choose, and then how to build a sustainable metabolism supportive plate, and how to really just choose the right diet for your physiology. And of course, we will have some time for questions. I started off with like 10 slides and somehow I have 19. So I apologize. I just want to be thorough with this. So, how is it that one diet can create weight loss or fat loss in one person and metabolic downregulation in another person? And this is really where we're talking about, again, keto, carnivore, fasting. And it's because it's not a static thing. People have different light environments. People have different stress loads, different mitochondrial capacity, different hormonal terrain. So when we look at someone and why one diet just works so well for someone and then why it fails miserably for another person, these are the big inputs that we are taking into consideration, that most calorie calculators, most people aren't going to ask about these things or consider them. They're just going to say, here's your total daily energy expenditure. Now do a calorie deficit. Boom. Doesn't matter what you eat, just do a calorie deficit. So this is why this approach is a bit different. And weight loss resistance is a term that gets thrown around a lot. And what it is it's actually adaptive physiology. So the lens that I always work through is that your body is doing exactly what the environment and what you are instructing it to do, whether or not you're consciously trying to produce a down regulation or something that's not necessarily ideal. Probably not, right? You're probably not necessarily trying to do that. But instead of looking at the body and acting as though it's fighting you, which I think is a very common thing that gets kind of thrown around out there, I think it's important to look at these things like reduced metabolic rate, increased hunger, reduced thyroid output, elevated cortisol, leptin resistance, and poor glucose handling. It's just your body is adapting to the information that it's been given, and it's responding appropriately to a perceived threat. So this is really important when we're looking at, again, why someone might do a ketogenic or carnivore diet and just have a beautiful experience, or they might do that diet and feel terrible and develop sleep issues and have further downregulation of thyroid. So this is really important context. Let's talk about terrain, because terrain is another term like weight loss resistance that really gets thrown around quite a bit. There's no diet that exists in a vacuum. As much as, there's all these food wars going on online, there's no diet that just exists just in a vacuum. Your metabolism is regulated by light exposure, timing, circadian rhythm integrity, stress hormones, sleep quality, your daily and seasonal regular signals or lack thereof, right? If someone's just never going outside, they're very dysregulated. Again, that's going to impact how well your metabolism works, your mitochondrial redox state, which is, again, mitochondrial function. And circadian disruption alone can induce a degree of insulin resistance, even without excess calories. And I have a few studies listed here. Shift work increases risk of insulin resistance in type 2 diabetes 20 to 40%. So if you're someone who's a quote unquote night owl and you're never, or you're like a lot of clients and students that we fall into the trap of scrolling in the bed, until 11, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. You wake up in the middle of the night, you pick up your phone, you start scrolling in the middle of the night because you're stressed and you can feel like it's helping you unwind. That bright light, what it's doing is mimicking to some degree the shift work. So you can create some insulin resistance and metabolic issues simply by those habits, right? Eating late at night also worsens glucose tolerance independent of calories. So again, meal timing is a big part of this. We've got some really interesting studies to show how eating earlier in the day works better for your metabolism. Circadian misalignment is going to reduce insulin sensitivity within 2 days. So that is basically not sleeping, staying up late, staying up all night, having these kind of sloppier.
Hindering your insulin.
Yep, exactly. Okay. And then we go to light is a metabolic input, not a lifestyle extra. So this is again where a lot of the nutrition advice falls short, in my opinion, because we need to look at these master hormones, right, that are highly regulated by light. Leptin, cortisol, melatonin, and even insulin runs on a circadian rhythm. You're more insulin sensitive in the morning. That means your body is able to break down, utilize food as energy earlier in the day than you would be, let's say, 10 o'clock at night. That's when your pancreas wants to go to sleep. Your digestive system is making less stomach acid, less digestive enzymes. And so, really, when you look at the body as this circadian being rather than calories in, calories out, it doesn't matter what time you eat as long as you're in a calorie deficit. Yeah, you can go in a calorie deficit and eat all of your calories at 8 o'clock at night. Go right ahead. But is that how you want? Is that how you want to live? Is that what you want to do? I'd rather you have a little bit more freedom and sustainability. And that's what we're going to get to when we talk about how to build a quantum plate is sustainability. It's super important that you're able to actually maintain this. And if anyone is not muted, can you please make sure that you're muted? I would highly appreciate it. Okay, so your brain uses light to help decide, is energy available or scarce? Should we burn or conserve? Is this a growth season or are we in a survival season? So, really, quite literally, the inputs of light that you're giving your body will help you kind of turn these hormones on. In the morning when you wake up, you still have a little bit of pineal melatonin circulating, which creates a little bit of a degree of insulin resistance. So really getting out, waking up your brain, getting morning sunlight, a little bit of movement, hydration, those things are going to help clear out that pineal melatonin, start the rise of cortisol, and really sync up those hunger hormones like leptin. So yes, these things, light matters as a metabolic input. Light regulates insulin sensitivity. We have tons of studies to show this. Cortisol, melatonin rhythm, very important. Leptin signaling and mitochondrial efficiency is highly regulated by light. Dr. Glenn Jeffrey is someone, if you want to study how mitochondria specifically impact light and aging, I highly recommend his work. It's really a lot about long wavelength light and how that helps to slow down aging and helps to improve glucose tolerance, and how blue light actually does the exact opposite. These LEDs with no infrared, with no long wavelength light. It's very fascinating. So, what does this boil down to when we look at building a nutritional plan for someone, if you're someone that works inside all day under artificial lights, your metabolism, your hormones are going to be different than someone who's able to get sunlight throughout the day and sits near a window, because that's also helpful. You're going to have different metabolic outcomes based on your light inputs and your.
Hold on. What?
If you guys would please make sure that you're muted.
Yeah.
Someone's talking. Thank you, Becky.
Diane, can you please mute? I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Okay. So, sorry, that really throws me off. It's important to just understand your daily working environment is really important in how we build this nutritional plate and other things you might be susceptible to, like thyroid issues, and how we can actually support that. Okay, next slide. All right, light interventions and metabolism. So again, you work in an office, we need to understand that bright daytime light is going to improve insulin sensitivity. So we have to find a way to do that, find a way to take those breaks, kind of really tailor your life around that. Window exposure, even. So if you can move your desk next to a window, that's actually been shown to improve glucose control in diabetics because some red light can get through the window. Evening blue light. Again, this is like low hanging fruit that I think a lot of people, they just don't know. They don't know because it's so ingrained in our culture to stay up watching TV, Netflix, phone screen in the face. This worsens glucose tolerance. So how well your body can handle carbs, raises insulin and blood sugar, even in the absence of food. We do have the scientific data to show that. And again, on the flip side of that, red and infrared light support mitochondrial efficiency and blood sugar regulation. So adding some of that to your daytime environment is also going to impact how well your body can handle carbs. UV light also helps with appetite regulation via what's called alpha MSH. So making sure that you're getting some UV light in your day is also very important. So light can either amplify or buffer dietary stress. Your daily and evening environment impacts how well your body uses food for fuel. Your meal times also impact how well your body uses food for fuel because your body, as I mentioned earlier, runs on a circadian rhythm. Every single cell and organ system in your body has a circadian clock in front of it. So that's important to understand when we look at insulin sensitivity, that changes throughout the day. So just understanding these things is really important. Okay. Now, here's another thing I see a lot in the nutritional landscape, and that is that the CGMs are really, really popular, wearing the continuous glucose monitors. And I'm not against them by any means, but I think that we are missing the point with a lot of these CGMs and a lot of people just really having a fear of blood sugar spikes. Now, obviously, there's context and nuance to this. If you're a diabetic, then yeah, you probably need to wear a CGM to monitor this important, right? But if you're someone who is just wanting to lose 20, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, right? And you're not diabetic, I'm not going to have you stress out over every little blood sugar rise and fall, right? A healthy metabolism doesn't mean that there's no glucose movement at all, that you are supposed to have a response to your food, right? You're supposed to go up maybe 20, 30 points, and then it comes down within an hour or two of eating that food. Returns to baseline, and your metabolism is meant to adapt to context. Flatlined glucose is going to a lot of times reflect stress hormones masking response, impaired metabolic flexibility, and potentially, again, none of this is diagnostic. These are just things that it could mean if you're flatlined all the time, suppressed thyroid output. And the other issue is that a lot of people don't start a diet. Like, we're here in January. That's why I thought it would be a great time to do this webinar. A lot of people are thinking about making dietary changes, but they're not in a neutral, well-regulated place to begin with. They're starting off sleep deprived, chronically stressed, undernourished, and overstimulated by artificial light. So when you're looking at things like carbohydrate restriction, calorie restriction, prolonged fasting, which again, I'm seeing all these different fasts and things going around. They promise a quick fix. These things are not going to necessarily optimize your metabolism. You're just stacking a stress on top of stress. And your physiology, a lot of the time, is going to respond by conserving energy, increasing hunger signals, disrupting sleep, and downregulating your metabolic output. So there's always context and nuance when it comes to blood sugar, when it comes to fasting, when it comes to carb restriction, all of these things. Okay, so again, CGMs, as I said, can be helpful. They must have context, right? If you're diabetic and your doctor has said you need a CGM, please listen to your doctor, right? Please follow with your doctor, with your healthcare practitioner. If you do want to use a CGM to see what is my body doing, right? And Becky is a queen of CGMs. She's used a lot of them. Um, you have to understand, number one, a lot of the CGMs can be inaccurate and they have to be calibrated to like a little finger prick meter. You know, some of them can be off 20, 30 points. That's one. But as I mentioned in the previous slide, in a metabolically healthy person, a post meal glucose rise often peaks around 30 to 60 minutes and returns near baseline around 2 to 3 hours. So I'll get people in my membership group that are like, I just ate, this apple. I went up by 20 points, and they're like really stressed out about this. I'm like, okay, what happened at the 2 hour mark? They're like, oh, it's back to normal. I'm like, that's just what your body is actually supposed to do. Right. Other things that can change your blood sugar. And I know Becky has found this out by wearing CGM. I found it out by wearing a CGM, and that's why I don't wear them because they drive me crazy. One time I had a CGM on and my daughter pulled a pipe off the wall and it flooded within about 3 minutes, like because she pulled a pipe off the wall and like water just started pouring out of the wall. It was insane. And I happened to be wearing a CGM and my blood sugar went up to like 140 and stayed there the entire rest of the day. And I had not eaten anything. And so, really, we don't give as much credit to our stress physiology when it comes to these CGMs and things like that. We think it's all food. It's also stress, it's sleep quality the night before, time of day, muscle glycogen status, light exposure, menstrual cycle phase, recent exercise. So all these things, this is why I don't have people really stress out and use a bunch of CGMs as like a baseline strategy. You can also see compression lows during sleep, nighttime peaks and dips that can just reflect normal physiology, right? REM cycles, sensor artifact. So before you kind of like diagnose yourself with something from looking at a CGM and not necessarily working one-to-one with someone, just understanding human physiology. We're meant to respond to stress. We're meant to respond to exercise. We're meant to respond to food. We're not just supposed to be flat all of the time. And yes, we can develop unhealthy responses that are good to pay attention to, or we can no longer clear glucose. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about weight loss resistance, metabolic downregulation, and understanding long-term restriction and calories, because I don't want anyone to be afraid of necessarily a calorie deficit or using things like keto strategically. But we have to understand the potential downsides of doing these things long term. So when you go long term restriction, this can be too much fasting, right? I've learned this with even dinner skipping, right? We'll talk more about fasting on another slide, but even too much dinner skipping, right? Too much of a calorie deficit. If you're skipping dinner, you're putting yourself in a calorie deficit, likely, not 100%, but likely. right? So too much fasting, even if you do it in a hormonally friendly way, too much calorie restriction, too much low carb. This can reduce your T3 hormone and elevate your reverse T3. It doesn't always happen. And sometimes it's like subclinical. It's not even going to show up on labs. You just start having some hypothyroid symptoms like cold hands and feet, disrupted sleep, hair falling out. You may not even see it on the labs yet. This can often happen when there is some long-term restriction. Increased cortisol output, reduced leptin sensitivity. Leptin can go low, right? And that signaling is not happening to the brain the way it should. And then your body will reduce resting energy expenditure. So this is your body doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and why any sort of restriction has to be pulsed in appropriately for the individual. Calories are not just energy, they're electrons. That's how your mitochondria literally sees them. And again, chronic restriction is going to reduce electron availability, increase mitochondrial stress, lower ATP efficiently, and increase reactive oxygen signaling. So your body is going to compensate by slowing everything down. Now, again, on the flip side, just to play devil's advocate, a little bit of fasting, a little bit of calorie restriction. These things can have positive mitochondrial results, right? Can be helpful, just like lifting weights. So, not all stressors are bad. Hormetic stressors are meant to bring the body to the next level to help the body. But if you're already depleted, if you're already stressed, if you're under a lot of artificial light all of the time, we don't want to go directly to some sort of restrictive, over zealous protocol because of the things here. Okay, so speaking of fasting, your hormones run on a circadian rhythm. So cortisol, insulin sensitivity, leptin signaling, thyroid output, and mitochondrial efficiency all shift predictably throughout the day. So when fasting ignores this rhythm, it's going to eventually create metabolic stress instead of flexibility. That's that, what I like to call is this upside down U-shaped curve. And that's true for ice therapy, cold therapy, sauna therapy, lifting weights, exercise, right? Fasting. It's this kind of this Goldilocks amount. And what that's going to look like for you is depending on your bio-individual factors. So a lot of times fasting can backfire because people start when they're sleep deprived, stressed, underfueled, and again, overstimulated by artificial light. Adding prolonged fasting or skipping breakfast stacks stress on an already dysregulated system. And this is going to blunt your morning cortisol, weaken your leptin signaling, and increase reliance on stress hormones for energy, which is something we don't want to do. So fasting like that is more likely to backfire, at least initially, for women, high stress or poor sleep, people who have cold intolerance, low thyroid, or low leptin to begin with, indoor workers with high artificial light exposure, and then a history of chronic dieting or restriction. So there is a better way to do fasting if you are ready to do it, right? I never want anyone to just jump right into it, but it can't be helpful. And it would be skipping dinner, not breakfast. That's going to be a lot more compatible with your physiology, with human physiology, because of the circadian nature of mitochondria and hormones that I just mentioned. Your insulin sensitivity is higher earlier in the day. Cortisol metabolic output naturally decline at night. Your body temperature is meant to drop overnight. So when you're eating too close to bed, that's can keep your body temperature elevated, which can prevent some of those repair mechanisms from coming on board. So again, digestion, body temperature, and appetite all should downshift at night and the evening. But everyone's not ready to just jump right into dinner skipping. You got to make sure the system is nourished first. So signs that you're not ready to do fasting initially, and don't worry, there's other things we can do, would be difficulty falling asleep, nighttime waking, increased anxiety or restlessness. Those are the big ones. The trouble sleeping is typically like, hey, let's not do that right now. We need to bring more stability to the system on board. Okay, so the other piece missing in a lot of the nutrition and diet advice out there is seasonality and individuality. So your hormone and metabolisms are not meant to be static, they shift. And there is a body of scientific evidence to really show this. It's pretty fascinating stuff. So in winter, we're meant to be more melatonin dominant, repair focused, lower carb tolerance for many, although this is not a hard rule. There's going to be context and nuance around this. Higher melatonin, lower energy output. In summer, we typically, because of the abundance of UV light and more outdoor time exposure to infrared, the longer wavelength light as well, you're going to have higher insulin sensitivity, higher carb tolerance, again, not a hard rule, and higher activity capacity. The issue, why I say not a hard rule, is that most people are out of sync to begin with and eating and living in summer mode year round. Most people are, like I've mentioned a few times, staying up late at night with the phone in the face. They're watching TV, blue light. They're underneath artificial lights all day. They're in a heated environment. So, and the foods that they're eating are based on summer. So, because our grocery stores and modern convenience, God bless, has just kind of gotten people out of touch with what seasonality looks like and what it should feel like. So, because of the fact that most people are kind of in this summer metabolism, we really have to start with an approach based on the current metabolic terrain and daily environment to support the nervous system, because the nervous system is crucial in sustainability of an approach and just the being able to actually do it, right? Consistency over perfection. That's something I say to my members all the time. You have to be able to be consistent with something for it to work. It has to be sustainable for it to work. And that comes down to nervous system as well. So choosing the right diet for you, you got to first start off with questions like, how is my sleep? Is it crappy? No, we're not going to do a bunch of fasting then. We're not going to even put that on the table. What is my daily environment and schedule? Am I able to get morning sunlight? Am I able to layer in some of these really important pieces to support myself? Where do I live? And what time of year is it? Right? Are you in Alaska? Are you in Sweden? Are you in one of these like really dark places right now? That needs to also be taken into consideration. Is my energy stable? Do I feel good? Do I feel stable and nourished? Am I recovering well? Most people need to start with a more balanced approach. We have a whole macro framework, but we typically start people with like 35% carbs, 25% protein, 40% fat, or we play around with the carbs, protein, and fat. That's eating single ingredient seasonal whole foods. So instead of saying, hey, you have all this excess weight to lose, let's throw you straight to zero carbs. We're going to give you a balanced approach to that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in some more slides, but it's going to vary per person. If you're someone who's done zero carbs for a long time, which I get a lot of those people who've been zero carbs for multiple years, then it's something where we're going to have to bring you up to that level.
It's Christmas.
I don't know, Becky, do you have the ability to mute people? I'm gonna have to jump out of my full screen to mute this person.
I don't. NP, can you mute, please?
I don't know if they even know that they're unmuted.
Say, unless you make me host, I can't. Yeah.
I just muted. God bless. God bless. Okay. We're good. All right. Now I don't know how to make this screen go away. All right. So where was I? With building your nutritional framework, again, if you're someone that's been low carb for a really long time, this isn't going to work for you. If you're someone who's been super high carb, I do get people that have done like a repeat style where they're getting 300 grams of carbs per day. That might be too stressful. So again, a lot of the time, we're going to start you in one of these places to build that stability, to build that baseline but it's not a hard, fast rule for everyone because there's always a context of what diet are you eating right now, you know? So that's an important distinction to make when I say, here's some starting macros that you can actually start with. Okay. The protein craze. Oop, let me see. Am I still sharing? Okay, yes. The protein craze is a big thing. And I feel like the 2025 was the year of like putting cottage cheese and protein powder on everything. And I had a rash of students and clients that were coming in with just way too much protein for what they actually needed. So, how much protein do you actually need? It's going to be individual, but more protein doesn't necessarily equal better. It's about having enough. When you have very high protein without enough fat and carbs, this can increase your stress hormones, impair your glucose handling, believe it or not, suppress thyroid and reproductive signaling, and reduce your metabolic flexibility. So, when we look at protein, it's important to see it as a tool and not the whole plate. Carbs and fat are your energy sources. Protein's not able to do the whole job. So, this is my baseline protein formula that I give to everyone to start with. You're going to adjust up if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, male. You typically need a little bit more active, or an athlete. So this is a baseline. Typically, I'll have people start here, and then we play. We're like, okay, did you have a sleep issue? Did you feel like you had stable energy? Did you feel like you had satiety with your meals? Yes. Okay, let's keep doing that. No, let's take that up a little bit. Let's play around a little bit. So again, not a hard and fast rule, not medical advice. But what I typically do is have people take their desired body weight in kilograms times 1.5. And then that number that you come out with, divide that by 3, and that's your protein grams through the day. That's how much you would eat potentially at each meal. Now, you can play around, like you may have a little bit more. It doesn't have to be a hard, fast rule. People think that where people get really tripped up with nutrition is they think like it's a calculator and I have to have 35%, 25%, 40% every day. Every meal has to be this. It's not that way. Your body is not that way. These are estimations, and these are kind of like baselines to get you to that place where it's a sustainable, because I don't want you for the rest of your life pulling out a calculator and a measuring scale every time you eat. So this is kind of an on-ramp, but getting this protein pulse through the day and this baseline amount is going to really typically help with that leptin signaling, because protein is essential for leptin signaling, having a high quality protein source, hormones, blood sugar regulation, muscle, and long-term metabolic health. Again, if you're a bodybuilder, or if you're an athlete, or you're pregnant or you're breastfeeding, go up a little bit, right? But this is a good baseline place for people to start. All right, next slide. Okay, so here we go. How to figure out what actually makes sense for you. And this is the steps of building a sustainable plate. Build stability before creating an energy gap, which is a calorie deficit. You know, it's a lot of people say calories don't matter. Some people say calories are the only thing that matters. There's not, it's not black and white. If you're eating more food than your body needs, regardless of calorie or whatever you want to call it, if you're eating more than your body needs, you're going to gain weight, period. And that could be due to you having metabolic downregulation. That could be due to having suboptimal light environment, or all of the above. That could be due to having more stress, poor sleep, right? So the people that say you have to be in a calorie deficit, there's a thread of truth to that, you know? It's just like, how hard are we going to make this on ourselves? That's where I come in, is like, this is where I disagree, that you should just give someone calories and run away, right? It needs to be static. It needs to be at the same time we're working on your terrain, your light environment, your routines, your timing, these other things that support your metabolism, as I've already hopefully laid the foundation for already in this webinar. All of those things matter, and they increase your body's ability to use food for fuel, period. So it's important to create an approach that's going to support that. So center of the plate, stability, that's going to be your protein. And understanding the goal initially should always be to stabilize your energy first, to build that healthy system first. You know, it's very tempting the very first week of, excuse me, of January, or, you know, the beginning of January, everyone's thinking, I'm going to do this fast. I'm going to jump right into this diet. It's World Carnivore Month. No hate to any of the carnivore people if they want to do that. I did that back in 2019. It worked great initially until it stopped working. But this is a common thing that we don't create stability. We rush into something extreme and then we wonder why it backfires, right? We wonder like what happened. So you've got to have stability first, and that's going to be protein. That's going to be your anchor at every single meal. So it is very important. That's for signaling, leptin signaling, repair, satiety, and it's just going to support your system as a baseline. Now, carbs and fat, this is the one people have the questions on. This is why I start with that moderate approach that I talked about on the previous slide, those moderate numbers. Again, if you're coming from a super high carb background, that's going to look different. I'm not going to jump because that would even feel low carb to you, what I just said on the other slide. And if you're coming from keto carnivore, I'm not going to jump you to those macros either, because your body is probably going to not be able to handle the carbohydrates as of yet. We have to get you there slowly. But your food has to have energy, and that's carbs or fat. So we have to really understand thyroid support, nervous system safety. That's why we go with those middle of the line approaches where it's just a balanced amount of both. And we're going to look at, again, if you're in winter, we're going to look at root vegetables, cellar stable foods. Those are going to be your carbs, potatoes, sweet potatoes, again, squash, things, fruits like that are cellar stable, like apples. You can make baked apples. There's a lot of things that you can choose from, because a lot of people will say, I'm in Canada, the ground is frozen, I cannot have anything seasonal. There's nothing in season. That's where we put in those cellar stable foods, right? Because again, here in the quantum biology space, there's dogma saying you have to do what's growing outside of your door, what's local, what's seasonal. I'm sorry, if somebody has very low thyroid function and they're living in Canada and they have very low leptin, low thyroid, I'm not going to tell them to only eat what's available outside their door, because there's nothing. We're going to have to look into the cellar, look into those things. And the cellar stable foods have been around, 10,000 years. So when people talk about ancestral, we've had ways to preserve food for thousands of years. So that's kind of just with the ancestral argument, my 2 cents here. We also have to look at your light exposure, your sleep quality, stress load, thyroid hormone status, season, gut health, and terrain. So if you're somebody that can't handle, again, carbohydrates because of your gut health, we're going to do everything we can to work on the gut through the light protocols and gradually increase carb tolerance, or choose carbs that are safer for your gut. So if you're someone with poor sleep, high stress, we're going to look at warm, cooked, grounding foods, blood sugar stability, and enough of those two energy sources. We're not going to say, let's push you right into carnivore. Let's start fasting protocol immediately. Let's go to one of these extreme protocols. We really want to get the signals back on board. If you're someone with good light, good sleep, more flexibility, then we can play around a little bit with more low carb or some fasting if that's what you want to do. But just to make everyone understand, you don't have to do low carb or keto or carnivore to lose weight. You don't have to do fasting to lose weight. You just don't. You can lose weight by simply creating an energy gap. And what that looks like for you is also going to depend on how well your terrain is able to handle that. So that's where we have to look at the entire person. Okay. And then I have one more slide here about what I feel like is the most important thing, and I think this is something Becky and I have really worked on with a lot of our group members and just clients, especially over the last year, is um, something that's sustainable. Again, stability before creating an energy gap and understanding that.
Hi, Daria.
God bless.
Daria.
Another one. How does it keep happening? Okay. Repeatability, right? So consistency over perfection. That's something I always try to hammer into people. If you can't be consistent with it, then it's not going to be something that you're able to maintain down the road. Can I eat this consistently? Does this feel doable to me? Does this calm or stress my system? Right. The thing I think that, sometimes carnivore can be helpful for people is because it's like predictable. I know what I'm having every day. It's not a bunch of, extra stuff. The issue that comes up is the metabolic downregulation and the mineral issues that people tend to deal with on those diets. But a lot of people, if you tell them the only thing you're allowed to eat is meat, or conversely, you have to go vegan to lose the weight, that's going to create a stressor in the system. It's not going to be calming. It's going to be like, wait, what? I can't, so we have to look at the diet and say, am I constantly feeling horribly deprived from this? Or is it doable? Is my energy, and let's face it, eating single ingredient whole foods might be stressful for people who are eating everything out of a box, who are eating microwave meals, who are eating fast food, who are getting Uber Eats for every meal. Yeah, that might be a little bit stressful. So we have to, again, go back to context and nuance. But once you switch into that, once you are doing that, right, your body should feel a lot more stable, like supported. You shouldn't feel like you're in stress mode. How you change your plate when you have less light or less sleep, you need more support. You need less restriction, so less fasting. If you're doing any fasting, when my stress dial goes up, I'm like, nope, we're not doing any dinner skipping this week. I will make sure I cut my eating window off so I've got plenty of time before bed. That's just a rule that I follow. But again, you don't want to say, I'm going to go into an extreme calorie deficit while I'm sleep deprived. You just want to make sure your body is more nourished during that time. And I had a trainer, Rob Jacobs, at one time that when I would go there and I'd say I was up all night with my kid, he would send me home from the gym, or he would have me do like a very light workout just to, stay consistent. But like, we're not going to go hard on the weights today because it's just not smart to do that. And, with your food, with your meal plan, it should be the same. So again, you can add a little bit more stress on when your body has stability on board. So you can play a little bit more with things like fasting if that's what you desire. All right, what else did I put in here? The next slide. Okay, warning signs that your diet is backfiring. Again, how to know, because a lot of people say, oh, I started this diet, I feel good, but all of a sudden, the first thing that usually goes with people is sleep. So they start waking up at night and they're like, what's happening? I'm like, oh, did you take your carbs down? That used to be a thing in our, before I changed the macros and the leptin reset to really kind of reflect all this. That would be a common thing in the group. Well, I'm doing the leptin reset and now my sleep is terrible. I'm like, what did you do to your diet? Oh, I went down to low carb. I'm like, okay, stop. Let's go back up a little bit. So usually worsening sleep is the first indicator that your diet is not working. It's an adaptive alarm. Fatigue, hair loss, loss of motivation, increased food obsession, feeling colder. And again, why diets stop working, like keto, like carnivore, is that there are physiological drivers like thyroid downregulation, elevated cortisol, leptin resistance. Your body stops it stops getting that signal from leptin, and then mitochondrial stress and circadian mismatch. So, how well your body can do on a particular quote unquote diet is going to depend on these things, which is why I don't put people onto the extreme diets unless there's a medical reason to do so. So let's talk about the real goal. What is our goal with our nutritional plan? It's not having perfect macros all the time. We want to hit our protein. It's not zero glucose movement. It's not being restricted all the time because you're not going to be able to do that long term. The goal is metabolic resilience, hormonal responsiveness, seasonal adaptability. So we want to change and have some variation in the diet, and a body that feels safe enough to release weight and then maintain a healthy weight without a constant yo-yo. And understanding that food is just one signal. There's also light, timing, season, stress, sleep, and environment. Those are also going to determine whether the food becomes fuel or a threat. And hormones like leptin, cortisol, and melatonin are crucial to how well your body responds to any diet. So the light thing is not an optional thing. It's like part of the whole package. And it's just really important to understand how all these things work together. So before I jump into questions, I'm going to offer, I'm going to put it in the chat here as well, some extra support beyond the webinar, and I will answer some questions. Becky and I are going to be running starting on January 26th, but I'm going to open it to webinar people first because you guys were kind enough to come here today. We're going to have limited spots to this. We have just launched what's called the Bio Individual Blueprint, and we're giving $100 off for the next 48 hours. It's going to start January 26th. It's going to go for 6 weeks. And it's essentially an individualized plan based on an extensive questionnaire. We're going to help you figure out light, timing, how your plate should be set up. And it's live. We're going to have calls. So we'll help you to tweak macros as needed. So I'm going to throw that in the chat with the coupon, and it'll go out with the replay to everyone. But you can check that out. And all right. We are good. Time for questions. I'll stop sharing. And Becky, I don't know how much of the chat is.
Yep, I will. I'll feed them to you.
Okay. All right. Great. That'll be helpful.
All right. So you pretty much answered one. People were asking, how do you work with individuals that need more help figuring this out? So definitely join that program. But
yes,
how do you address the long-term caloric restriction as how long to see improvements from that? Is there an order to correct the calorie intake? So basically she's asking about refeeding.
yes. That's again where we would really want to have an individual approach where we can monitor things with you, because it's one of those things where we need to get nourishment and leptin signaling back on board for you. If you've been on a lot of diets, on a lot of low calorie or low carb or a lot of fasting, that's where we take our time, and I have the 21-day leptin reset. 21 days is just to help reestablish that leptin signaling. But it can take time, it can take 4 to 6 weeks of us really working together, making sure that we're slowly bringing that nourishment piece and that signaling back on board so that your body doesn't think it's under stress anymore. And you can have that metabolic downregulation even if you have weight to lose. That's a very common thing with women that I know Becky and I have worked with a lot of that are kind of more so in the perimenopause, menopause area. And they've done so much fasting and yo-yo dieting and all of that the body is just kind of like, no, no, and then if you go to some coaches, they're going to say fast harder, calorie deficit harder, keto harder, carnivore harder. And then you're going to get off in a worse situation. So this building safety and stability is something where we have to be patient, but I would say give it at least, 4, 6 weeks. I don't know how you feel about that, Becky, but that's kind of my idea there.
Yeah. And it really ends up, and it depends where they're coming from. If they're only eating 1,000, 1,200, or maybe
Right.
they've been doing the mimicking fasting, which was one of the comments previous in the chat as well, was people that have been restricting over time, they've downregulated that metabolism. It does take that time. We're not talking about a light switch approach of, you're going to end up and see these results in, 3 weeks or 90 days or whatever. We're looking at a sustainable lifestyle and creating that so that your body benefits.
right? And that's why light is really important in all of this as well, because it's an extra signal that can support bringing those hormones back online that have kind of been like flatlined, right? You have to have proper light signaling for thyroid. You have to, if we're trying to improve thyroid function, which is typically downregulated with long-term restriction, light is a big key component and player in this, along with nervous system regulation and that safety piece. And that's kind of more what Becky and I are going to be doing in that 6-week group, is supporting people, whatever your goal is, could not even be weight loss at all, could just be, I want to feel better, have more energy, right? Yeah.
Correct. And speaking of the light, someone asked, does a bright light in the morning help us in northern climates where light happens to be later in the morning and we have snow, cold, gray, and rain?
So, I mean, it depends on what time the sunrise actually is there, what your schedule is. It's hard to directly answer that, because ideally I want someone getting the natural sunlight first, even if it's cloudy, even if it's rainy, even if there's snow, and then doing potentially something like a red light therapy session. That's where we would, again, kind of help you set that kind of thing up. So the blueprint's going to be everything you want to know, how to put this in your schedule: red light, light timing, kids keeping you up all night, office job, like how to optimize that. But if you're in a northern climate and it's snowy, then you do want to still try to get that natural light in your eyes first. And then I would come in and do like a red light therapy session. Now, I have played around with the Chroma 10,000 lux light box. I think it's the best light box that there is if you want to get a light box. And my code there is Sarah K. But I still tell people, even if you want to use that light box, you really want to go outside and get natural signaling first. That's going to be really important. And layer in the red light therapy and keep the light box used only in the morning. You don't want to be using that thing all day when you're feeling down and depressed, because that can really create some circadian dysregulation.
Perfect. And I'm going to kind of group a couple of these together, because one was asking about, well, what about people that are talking about 30 to 40 grams of protein in a meal?
Mm-hmm.
And someone else was asking about how to transition from zero carb to adding back. So kind of what we did with going, multiple years of carnivore
Mm-hmm.
and adding those seasonal carbs back.
Yeah. So 30, 40 grams might be okay for you, right? Like, I don't know your desired body weight in kilograms times 1.5. That might be okay. Um, it's all context dependent. People that are doing, I have had multiple clients, I know Becky has too, where they've been to a personal trainer or even a nutritionist, and they're eating, I had a 5'1" woman who wasn't an athlete, wasn't built active even, and they were having her eat 140 grams of protein a day, and her insulin was at a 24. So she's already getting high insulin, or what I would call elevated insulin, because they were like, oh, 24 is fine. I'm like, what? Huh? So she's already seeing her insulin go up, and she's eating this really high protein. And we took the protein down, and insulin pretty quickly went down. And she started losing weight. And so protein is, again, it's a Goldilocks thing. You have to eat enough of it. I don't want anybody eating low protein. But if you tip it too high for you based on your activity, muscle, all those things, you can create too much insulin signaling in the body, and it can stress your body out, because protein is not an energy source. Carbs and fat are your energy sources. Protein is a building block. It's essential for signaling. It's crucial, right? But it's not an energy source. So you can't just eat straight protein. Try the protein sparing modified fast. That is the worst diet ever, in my opinion. That is the one that makes people binge more than anything, because you just get this like rabid starvation. There's no fat in that diet. It's just protein, and you just end up horribly depleted. Um, and then as far as adding the carbs back in is something that we do slowly. You don't just go from eating no carbs a day to eating tons of carbs, because your body is likely not carb tolerant. So you're going to feel bad. And your digestive system is also not going to be ready to handle those carbs. So you have to do some support there. But that's something that Becky and I have worked with a lot of people to do. and we go slowly. We eat the carbs in the middle of the day. We eat a little bit more gut friendly carbs, um, and it's a slow approach to get you to slowly increase the carbs without gaining a ton of weight, which you won't as long as you stay in that energy gap, right? The problem that people run into when they add the carbs back in after long-term carnivore or keto is that they're used to eating a lot of fat. And so they keep eating the same amount of fat that they were, and they just add carbs. And they're like, well, I just gained a massive amount of weight from this. This is not working. Going back to keto. I'm like, well, when carbs go up, fat goes down, right? Just like when fat goes up, carbs go down. These are levers, and you can have them both at reasonable amounts, and not gain weight. It's all about total intake, total energy, and the system that is also processing them.
Correct. And that's where, yeah, it is looking at what is ideal for you. Which someone asked in regards of another program. I'm not going to name the program because this is a recording. So, but we have seen it multiple times in the private membership. So you're not alone. We sympathize. We sympathize with you. We know exactly where you say, I thrive for 10 weeks. Then my system crashed and it told me to eat more meat. I lost too much weight and couldn't figure out why. Have not been the same since. Anxiety, no sleep. How do I bring back that stability? So that's essentially the question, is how to bring back that stability to the nervous system.
Yeah, slowly and patient with yourself. That's definitely where Becky and I could help. But it is very common. And it's, again, we're not going to name the program because I feel like we need a support group for these ladies that we continue to get, and they continue to show up on my Instagram DMs, in my Instagram comments, like nonstop. They've done this very restrictive program of carnivore and been, oh, your hair is falling out, you're not eating enough meat. Oh, you can't sleep, you're not eating enough meat. And it's just crazy to me. Eventually, the women, they're like, this is dumb. Why am I paying money for this? And I don't feel good. And so then they come to us. And it is a place where we have to, again, pull in all the levers that we can that are going to support your nervous system, because the trouble sleeping, the hair, like your body is just, it's done what it's responding to what you've done to it. So it's not maladaptive. It's not bad. It's just that now we have to bring in those safety signals, and we have to slowly add in some nourishing foods. We have to get your light and dark signals, if they're not already regulated, that's going to help your daily signals of light. Oftentimes people are also over exercising in conjunction with these programs. So sometimes we dial the exercise back a little bit, do more gentle walking, gentle movement, while we're bringing these other signals back on board, right? Supporting thyroid through blood sugar stability. A lot of times you've become very low insulin, very low blood sugar. So we have to bring those back up slowly. So I don't want anyone to think like after they've done this, they're ruined for life and they cannot recover, because your body is not stupid, and it can, and it's built to recover. It's built to heal. You just have to give it those supportive inputs in order for that to happen. Sorry about that. My internet decided to crash. So
That's
now I'm
right.
hotspotted to my phone. Where
No
were we?
worries.
What other questions do we have? Sorry about that.
Yeah, nope, that's exactly what I just told them, that we would end up and piece together these recordings. So this final Q&A would still end up and be on there. But
yes,
we've learned to navigate technical difficulties. Speak to breakfast timing. Example, does it have to be before UVA rise?
I like that, but really what's more important is that you're clearing that melatonin, that you've gotten a little bit of sunlight in your eyes, a little bit of movement. Those things are more important than just like having this like perfect timing. But ideally, I do like it to be before UVA rise. if at all possible.
Perfect. When you say go outside in the morning to help with leptin resistance, how long do we need to be outside for?
I always say something is better than nothing. You know, there's going to be some mornings where it's really hard to get out there for longer than a couple of minutes. And then there's going to be mornings where maybe you've got 20, 30 minutes, right? So it's just about getting that signal synced up as much as possible, because that's going to really support leptin signaling. So anything you can do, even if it's like opening a door, sticking your head out the window and then coming back in, 30 seconds at a time. Just think of, we're just syncing the brain. We're syncing up the brain with the light, with the timing, and something's always going to be better than zero.
Exactly. It's a cumulative effect. So it ends up and it builds. And that's where the sustainability and the progress over perfection.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times where all I can do is get to a door or get to, that open window with the screen. So
yeah, I mean, longer is always better, right? I was able to sit outside for an hour this morning because my toddler cooperated. But some mornings it's just total chaos in my house. And I'm like lucky if I got 5 minutes, So it's like Becky said, it's cumulative and there's no like formula, right? We always want like a formula or protocol. It has to fit into your life. That's the most important thing. And I don't want anyone to be like, well, I just can't do it perfectly to this like X protocol, so I might as well not do it. It's got to fit into your life.
And if someone can't go outside, can they use a infrared light?
I mean, that's going to help, but there's no blue in you need the blue light to turn on that suprachiasmatic nucleus and start syncing up those clocks. And that's why outside is important. You can even get, you want to get lux, which is outside as well, brightness. You really want that. But you can get blue light through a window, So you really want to go outside, but you can get some blue light through a window as well.
Awesome. And Linda asked, I understand the percentages of each macro, but how do we know the total, the fat, the protein, the carbs, so that we can determine how many grams of each we need? For example, if we need 100 grams in total and we are doing a 60-30-10 split, then I know I need 60 grams of protein, 30 grams of fat, 10 grams of carbs. So we're not splitting it. Sorry, I'm going to chime in there. We're not splitting it by meal. We're splitting it. We're figuring out the protein as an anchor for the day. And then we are looking at what is the energy need of the others. But go ahead and chime in, sir.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of more on an individual basis of like if the basic macros that I put out there, I mean, it's going to have to equal 100% because I'm not really sure if I understand the question or not.
And how do we manage people who are underweight who can't eat a lot of carbs?
That's again where we titrate, right? And we look at why can't they handle carbs and what can we do to help support the digestive system, to support the gut. And again, the titration is a big word here that I think if for anyone that's low leptin, someone who's been in a chronic low energy availability state for a long time, we don't want to just throw you to high carb. That's what the problem I see with a lot of people in the carnivore space is that it bottoms out on them. And then they're like, oh, I heard about this repeat diet. And they go straight to like super high carb, we're not going to we know that's going to set you up to fail and feel terrible and potentially gain a lot of weight. So we go very slowly with people.
Correct. And that's kind of leading into Maria's question in regards of belly pooch and often feeling bloated, because if the gut isn't, able to digest, then that can end up and happen. Now she's also asking, is a microbiome test a good idea?
I don't really think so. I think working on the basics, like, do you have enough stomach acid on board? Just testing that, doing maybe, again, not medical advice, but potentially doing an HCl challenge, making sure you've got enough stomach acid, and then adding something like digestive enzymes or bitters, making sure your circadian rhythm is intact, because that goes a long way for people when they have gut issues. A lot of time there's some sort of circadian disruption. looking at meal timing. I've had people fix gut issues by simply changing their meal timing because they were eating when the digestive system had pretty much already gone to sleep and there was no stomach acid on board. So it's multifaceted, but again, looking at the gut and these basic functions before, I wouldn't spend money necessarily on a microbiome test, not right away. I would kind of pull the low hanging fruit levers first.
And when you say to get UVA light, do you need to be outside when it first becomes available, like with sunrise, or is it just good to get out at any point during the UVA window?
I mean, again, consistency over perfection. There is something great about the sun when it's at a lower angle, you know, in it being more gentle. UV index is typically like still 0 or 1. So you're getting all that brain activation, the POMC neurons through the eyes and the skin, uh, helpful. But again, if you're doing a bunch of stuff, if you're working, you got kids, you got stuff going on, and you're like, oh, now the sun is at 16 degrees. Yeah, it's still good to go outside at that time. You're still getting benefits from that. You're always going to get benefits from going outside, even if it's not timed like perfect.
What is the cutoff date for joining our 6-week program?
Well, until probably either it fills up or the 25th, because we're doing like so much personalization with this, we are doing intake forms and it's going to be a lot of work on the back end for us. We're only taking in a certain amount of people, so it is going to be very limited. So if you're interested, I would go ahead and sign up, and the discount is only going to be good for 48 hours. So we're doing $100 off for the next 48 hours if it's something that you guys are interested in. And obviously, this is the first place I'm announcing it. It hasn't been announced anywhere else. So you guys get first dibs. If it fills up from here, awesome. It fills up from here.
So the next questions are kind of in regards of how is it best to structure a day? So like the best time to exercise, sauna, is it okay 4 nights a week with low lux, wearing blue blockers to watch TV, that type of thing?
So on my Substack, actually, I've got a full article. Let's see if I can pull it up that really talks more about the circadian timing of sauna, of exercise, because doing those things at like if you exercise too late in the day, it can actually phase shift your sleep. I'm trying to pull up the article. I wrote it way back in December. Um, Cold therapy too close to bed can also phase shift. Too much sauna too close to bed can phase shift. So I'm going to put that in the chat here, and that's on my Substack. If you're watching the replay, it's called Circadian Aligned Therapies, Red Light, Hydrogen, Vibration, and more. And I really dive more into the intricacies of that and give science behind all of those things. But, you know, if you want to watch TV at night and you've tested the Lux with my Circadian app, I would just cut it off, you know, an hour before bed, just because you don't want to keep your brain in that dopamine stimulated state. That's another reason why I try to stop scrolling and just really have rules about putting my phone down, because even if you've got all the lighting perfect and the screen, you're ahead of 99% of people, so don't get me wrong there, but you can create cortisol and you can stress yourself out through what you're consuming, be it TV or on your phone. So from a circadian standpoint, that's going to be massively helpful. It's just something that you want to be mindful of what you're consuming on TV. Like I had like a year ago, I just stopped, maybe 2 years ago, I stopped like having any interest in any sort of true crime. I'm like, I don't want to see it. Um, so yeah.
So kind of on that TV side of things, if someone is an early riser living in Massachusetts, say 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, would you suggest wearing blue blockers while watching YouTube on their phone, so they don't expose the eyes or prior to exposing eyes to sunlight?
I mean, yeah, I would definitely keep the lux low. If you're doing any phone screen on red, blue blockers, I just would never really recommend doing a lot of like stimulating YouTube, like, because when you wake up, something that's important is your brain is in you're coming out of delta, you're going into what's called alpha, and you're very highly influenceable. Your nervous system is very imprintable. And so when you're waking up, even if you're wearing the blue blockers, and the same thing before bed, you're going into alpha before you go to delta. That's why we have to be mindful of what we're consuming when we wake up, and or not consuming before bed, because we're kind of in a more programmable state at those times of day. So this is totally different from circadian biology. However, it's, I think, relevant to know, if you're looking to really support your nervous system, you may want to see, what am I doing at these crucial times, morning and evening? Can I replace that with something that's a little more introspective or positive, or listen to something that's programming me in a positive way, like Louise Hay, or, somebody that is supportive in that way. So from a circadian standpoint, that's going to be helpful, but just understand that about brain waves is also important as well.
Perfect. What do you mean single ingredient foods or meals? Do you mean no processed foods? Do you mean something else? And what about the Equip protein powder? You said you don't recommend the Equip protein powder that has stevia. What are your thoughts on the new one that has the coconut sugar and monk fruit?
I typically want people to stay away from powders just while doing like a leptin reset or getting signals back on board, because those can impact satiety. And I find that a lot of people that do the powders, they end up feeling hungrier. It can mess with insulin, and I just really don't like powders, period. Now, again, that's one of those things, like, is it better to have a protein shake with Equip, um, or go to McDonald's and get whatever, right? There's always like gold standard. I'd rather you not do that. Or, okay, I'm doing this instead of my normal fast food routine to go to, McDonald's or fast food or whatever. There's always like gold standard, and like, okay, we're moving towards, but typically if we're trying to get leptin signaling back on board, we want to use protein, meat, eggs, things like that are going to be your most bioavailable sources. And when I say single ingredient whole foods, that's just that, like, your squashes, potatoes, fruits, vegetables, those sorts of things. People that I do have in my thyroid module program that goes in the leptin reset. You guys would get it in the blueprint as well. Some grains that can be healthier or better, that aren't necessarily going to cause some of the issues that some other grains do, but I don't use them like as a baseline, right? So yeah, I typically would like people to get off processed foods. And just to talk to realistic and long term, if you have occasional fast food, if you have occasional processed food, it shouldn't throw everything into the gutter. It should be like, okay, I had this, and then I'm going to go back to eating what I know is better for me. And your body should be able to adapt to that and be okay. So I never want someone to say, oh, I can never eat XYZ, whatever. Just know that we're building a more resilient system, so that if you do have something like that, it doesn't lead to you going down a rabbit hole of just always eating bad foods and into a massive binge. It's like, okay, we had that. Let's move on. Let's go back, if that makes sense.
Well, and that's where I use the example of, we're not saying that you can't eat like soups and stews,
right? Oh yeah,
right? That you can't make a beef stew and use, beef and beef broth and carrots and potatoes. Right. We're not saying you can't eat that you have to have just a single ingredient on your plate.
Right.
It's a case of don't go and buy, the name brand can that has a bunch of other additives in that can to help with preservatives. Right. Or the mashed potatoes that are pre-processed that have, 10 ingredients on it, instead of mashing your own potatoes, that type of thing.
Exactly.
So, what about someone who has fasted and on days not fasting 500 calories a day for years? How do you not gain weight?
Titration. This is again where we have to go very slowly with you. And that would definitely be something I would consider doing the 6-week program, because we can tweak and adjust often. That's the advantage of doing that group. You get an initial plan, but then we have 6 weeks where you go in the group, we have live calls, and we can say, all right, let's adjust your plan accordingly. You're gaining weight or you're still not feeling better. Let's make these little changes and tweaks. But if you've done that for a very long time, it's a situation where we're going to need to go a little bit slower. And, I think also understanding where your body is at now and, what weight you're at, like those things are also important in the grand scheme of things, which obviously you don't have to share on the Zoom meeting, but we want to move you towards a healthy place. That's what's important. So, yeah.
And we might need to look at light and nervous system work and incorporating those prior to even adjusting the food, so that, again, those hormones are signaling. And then as you're refeeding, be able to bring that up.
Yeah.
With wearing blue blockers at night, should you wait to put the glasses on after your last meal? I am working on eating last meal by sunset or several hours before bed, but not quite there yet.
That's good. I just think as a general rule, dinner, once you're metabolically well enough to handle it, some people are going to come into this and they can't eat an early dinner or they have trouble sleeping. That just means we need to work more on blood sugar stability and overall capacity. It doesn't mean you can't ever get to the place where you stop eating dinner at a certain time. It just means that we have more work to do with blood sugar stability. But as a general rule, I just say try to keep dinner at least 3-4 hours away from bedtime, because some people, their sunset is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the wintertime. And that's going to be too stressful for most people to stop eating at 3 p.m.
Okay. And Trish is asking, what time of day does the live 6-week group meet on Monday and Fridays?
So Fridays are going to be 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then we'll have group access in between the calls, so that if you have questions or you need a tweak in the group, and the group's held on Kajabi. We're not doing Facebook. So it's on a different platform. And then I'm going to be dripping in a lesson. So I have my first live call is Monday, the 26th. That's going to be at noon Eastern time. But then every week after that, there's going to be a lesson that's dripped in on Monday, like an hour-long lesson. And then I'll be on the calls on Friday with Becky at 1:30 on Fridays.
Which of your programs is best one to start with? You have so many and just want to get a foundation done first, then move through with the others.
Yeah, the 21-day leptin reset is the best one if you're just looking for foundational, all the things I talk about here.
Perfect. For cycling women, what would you say is the most important thing to eat for hormone balance and general health and well-being? Would you say there are certain non-negotiables, food and nutrients, and thoughts on changing nutrition around menstrual cycle?
I mean, I think protein is very important for that blood sugar stability and just having blood sugar stability, period. And it's seasonality. We look at eating differently in the summer versus the winter. Winter is going to be more nourishing, warmer root vegetables, things like that are a bit more grounding. And as far as changing nutrition around menstrual cycle, I don't think we need to do drastic changes, because again, if we start overcomplicating things, then it's going to be hard to adhere to. I think during menstrual cycle and around that time where maybe the appetite is a little elevated the week before the cycle, that's more important to make sure that we're adding in more rest, and if we feel that we need it, and just paying attention to the body rather than looking at a calendar, because sometimes you'll feel fine. You're like, oh, I didn't even know that it was time for my cycle. Some months you're like, I've known this thing was coming and this has not been a good month. Right. So it's important to also listen to feedback, so sometimes the week before the cycle, you may say, I want to rest a little bit more, want to make sure I'm not fasting that week, no dinner skipping. I want to make sure I've got enough, carbs and fats on board, enough energy sources. But it's not a place where you need to do extra, add more, cycle hard, any of that stuff. It's more of like paying attention. And I mean, that goes for everyone, cycle or not. Becky has been, I don't know if Becky, if you don't mind if I share, you've were put
You're
in,
fine.
you were put in surgical menopause when you were like in your 20s, correct?
29, yeah.
Yeah. So Becky is the one I defer to, and that's why she works so closely with me because she knows what it's like to not have those reproductive hormones on board and the challenges that you can face with weight loss and energy and nutrition and all of that. She has really done a great job of navigating that for herself and then just with multiple clients. So sometimes we just have to understand when the body is under higher stress that we do have to make adjustments.
Correct. And making those adjustments and everything that we end up and we teach has also allowed me to manage it without the need for HRT.
Yeah.
So Jody, the calculation for the protein needs is ideal body weight times 1.5 grams. So your ideal body weight in kilograms times 1.5.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been adding, and Diane's unmuted again. I've been adding seasonal carbs back in, but even apples can cause an increase in anxiety and depression. What carbs or advice do you recommend if you've done low carb for mental health, been practicing circadian rhythm since July?
I mean, that's again going to be individual. Apples, you may need to bake them. Try those first. Is when you're eating them, like in the middle of the day, in sunlight. Also looking at supporting the gut and digestion as well, and potentially looking at adding in something like enzymes or making sure you don't have low stomach acid. If you have done the thing about if you've done low carb for a really long time, the gut in some regards can be use it or lose it. So people that are vegetarian for long amounts of time, the body stops or down regulates the enzymes like protease that help you digest protein because you're just not bringing it in. The same thing can happen with carbohydrates. If you haven't had them in a really long time, then your body will kind of down regulate the enzymes that your body needs to help break down the carbohydrates. And so that's why it's important to go slowly, to potentially add in some support, some digestive enzymes that actually have the enzymes that can help break down carbs. Looking at things like stomach acid as well in the grand scheme of things.
Can you talk about how to get enough fat? Protein and carbs are easy, but how do we get enough fat without eating dairy?
I mean, there's animal fats, that you can add, avocados, and it depends. And there's olive oil, coconut oil, and it just depends on, what your goals are really. But those are pretty easy add-ins usually. And remember, carbs and fat are levers, so there's plenty of plant fats that I think are totally fine. Good high quality olive oil, coconut oil, avocado. Those things are perfectly fine. There's usually a lot of fat on meat, if you're eating meat as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Instead of eating like a sirloin, end up and eat a ribeye, or instead of eating, pork chop, eat a pork loin or a pork steak, or, chicken breasts, eat chicken thigh. I mean, there's ways to end up and get that in a natural form without adding a lot of extra fat.
Yeah.
Any feedback regarding combining fats and carbs, specifically healthy saturated fats and carbs and fat loss resistance? Please specify the amount of fat. I am 11 years postmenopausal and have been doing light outside every dawn, eating 3 organic meals a day, low light at night for over a year.
I mean, that's where we have to adjust your actual macros, right? Because, like I said earlier, I don't want to oversimplify, but if you're not losing weight, that means you're not creating what I call, again, the energy gap. And so that's where those energy sources, the fat and the carbs, have to be adjusted.
Let's go for a walk.
Shirley, you're unmuted.
Mute. Okay, I can do it now. But that's again where we have to manipulate those energy sources to make sure that you're in an energy deficit, essentially. So again, I don't want to ever be overly simplistic, like a lot of these people online can be, and they could be very polarizing about it. It's just not that simple for people. But sometimes if you are, doing a lot of the baseline stuff, then it's time for us to make some changes.
Okay. What could be the cause of a very low, basically zero alpha MSH level, and what can bring that level up?
Lack of sunlight, lack of UVA light. That's a huge one. Low leptin, another one, poor leptin signaling. Also, mold can do that as well. So um, making sure that you're not living in a moldy environment that can also impact your alpha MSH.
Yes, the slides and everything
Those will come in the
will
report.
end up and be
Yes.
available. I don't know how many more of these are you wanting just to continue through them?
Yeah. How many more do we have? We're about it.
It's telling me right now 47.
Oh, geez. Okay.
What if you wear glasses? Is there an issue? No sunglasses or contacts, but have actual glasses, or even glasses that have the blue blocking?
I would defer to Quantum Eye Doc, Dr. Valerie. We've done some podcasts together. I typically don't like the blue blockers that come in glasses, but we talked about that on a recent episode that we did. So that's on my podcast with Dr. Valerie. I cannot pronounce her last name to save my life, but Dr. Valerie was just on my podcast and we really discussed that at length.
And again, kind of going back to morning routine, morning structure. If someone is up at 6:30, but the sun isn't up until 8:15, how do we seed the light and minimize the exposure without turning a bunch of lights on?
I'm sorry, I just zoned out for a second. I was like looking at the chat.
So that's all right.
I
So
made the mistake of looking at the chat. I'm like, no. What?
I'm fielding you the chat. So Bonnie, since you get up at 6:30 and the sun doesn't come up until 8:15, limiting your overhead blue light or wearing the blue blockers first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Is it better to get sunrise or UVA rise?
Yeah, I think they're both equally important. They do different things. Sunrise is like this very gentle amount of blue that starts to turn the brain on, and there's no UV light. And UV light has its own set of benefits with serotonin and dopamine and alpha MSH and leptin signaling. So ideally, in a perfect world, I would try to get a little bit of both.
Perfect. And Linda, I don't know what you mean when you say each morning I open up the window with the screen on. Oh, yeah. Open screen through a window is fine to end up and get that light if you can't get outside. If someone is dealing with chronic illness like Lyme disease and has been advised to eat paleo, keto, carnivore diet and intermittent fast to control blood sugar and inflammation, but the person's still not feeling positive response from those inputs, what would you advise?
I mean, that's where we would want to look at things, and say, what does your actual diet look like? Are you getting enough protein? Are you eating foods that are right for you with your lifestyle, with your environment? That's where we would really want to do some fine tuning to just make sure it's as optimized as possible, because sometimes a diet can look good on paper, but it's not working for you. And so that's where we have to adjust. We can play with macros, making sure you're having enough digestive support so you're actually breaking down and utilizing those nutrients. There could be hydration, things that we can tweak. So yeah, lots of things that we could look at.
Absolutely. How do you support if I don't have a gallbladder? And also, how do we raise leptin?
So raising leptin is going to be obviously light environment, but also if you are very low leptin, that's where we would potentially look at doing a little bit more carbs and a little bit less fat, because carbs are a really strong signal to bring leptin up. Again, it would be situational. It would be based on your questionnaire and kind of what you're coming in with, but that's again where we would probably look at approach like that. And with that, not having a gallbladder, the bigger issue with gallbladder is that you're not able to break down fat as efficiently. So something like keto or carnivore would be a lot harder. But there's also things you can take to help support the gallbladder. Digestive enzymes, TUDCA, things like that. Again, not medical advice, but that would also be something to look at if you don't have a gallbladder, is potentially adding in some extra support so you're breaking down your food as well as you need to.
Which also kind of goes into one of the other questions. Do we think that we need a minimum of fat per day to support hormones? And she's referencing 75 grams, but do we need a minimum?
Yes, absolutely. For every person, that's going to be a little bit individual. If you're doing high carb and low fat approach, then I don't have people do that for really a long amount of time. I almost never have anyone really do that. But if someone is doing a low fat, higher carb approach, it has to be done for a short amount of time, because that can also cause a metabolic downregulation, right? The low fat thing is not a great idea. But the amount of fat that I say you really shouldn't go under, I typically say 60 grams, but that's going to be variable. What if you're a very small person? What if you're a very large person, a tall person? That number is always going to be variable. So that's why we don't give like calorie amounts, because again, there's no hard, fast rules.
Right. Does anemia and low ferritin have any connection to light circadian?
Absolutely, because cytochrome 4 can absorb largely using heme iron. And so absolutely can play a huge role. The kind of light that you're surrounded by, the kind of light environment that you're in, what kind of signals your mitochondria are getting throughout the day for light can influence that. Now, is it the only thing? Absolutely not. There's also other mineral cofactors that need to be on board and gut that needs to be addressed. It's multifaceted, but light definitely plays a role in there.
Which, speaking of light, what about the dark side of things and taking walk after dark? Is that not a good idea?
No, I think that's fine. That's totally fine, especially if it's like after sunset and like right around that nightfall. There's a ton of infrared light available at that time. So I think it's totally fine.
And I chuckle because we knew this question was coming. If I have already done the personalized macros with Becky in the recent offer, should I not do the 6-week program, or should I?
This is just completely different than the macros because it's like a full lifestyle. You will get a nutritional allocation program. So you'll get a program for food, but this is just completely different because it's going to basically address your lifestyle from sunrise to sunset. It's going to address so much more, not just the diet. It's like everything. And then there's the personalized 6-week container where we're going to be in there every day answering questions, the live calls, and then the lessons that are dripped out weekly. So it's a lot more than just getting macros.
It is very in depth. I've seen what Sarah's put together, and it's very well in depth. This is the hardest part for me because I really crave chocolate sometimes, and it could be a week of eating it, and it's hard to get back. I recognize it as a potential magnesium deficiency, even though supplementing. So I'm currently experimenting with a higher dose and a mix of magnesium types. Craving for me seems to be a deficiency related in particular around ovulation.
I like Dr. Dean's, again, not medical advice, Dr. Dean's liquid magnesium, where you just put it in drops in your water through the day. That's usually a lot better absorbed for people who are dealing with a magnesium deficiency. And I don't think you should have to avoid chocolate for the rest of your life. Like I might get struck down from the heavens for saying that, but I have a little bit of chocolate every now and then. And I've been the same weight for the last year after like yo-yoing for my whole life. So it is possible to have some chocolate in your diet. After we've gotten things back on board, we can figure out a way to bring a little chocolate in your life if it brings you joy and happiness. So I wouldn't stress out over it too much.
Absolutely. And this next question kind of goes into the seasonal foods and how it ends up in shifts between wintertime and then spring and summer. Looking at it currently, it's more of a root vegetable, but incorporating more of like the greens and those come spring in the seasonal Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, and in my seasonal food course, which by the way, if you become a free Substack subscriber, you get that for free as part of just becoming a subscriber. That gives a seasonal food sourcing guide where you can basically type in anywhere in the US, and there's resources for Europe and even Australia in that course as well. But I typically tell people try to stick within, 4 or 5 hour radius of what's available because there's people that live in the desert, like nothing's growing there. So we have to look at things like UV index. What is your UV index? If your UV index is very low at the current season, you're going to try to stay away from like mangoes, bananas, tropical fruits, things like that. As a general rule, if you just have a craving for a banana and it's the middle of December and you just have to have a friggin' banana, okay, I'd rather you have that than like a bag of Doritos. Um, Sometimes you crave things because your body is just like needing what's in that, especially if it's a whole food. But when we're looking at choosing a diet based on seasonality, we're looking at the UV index, we're looking at what's around you. And it doesn't have to be like perfect, it really doesn't have to be.
Absolutely. I'm doing the leptin reset course and I understand the proper macro breakdown percentage wise, but how do we know how many grams total of everything or how to figure the actual grams?
I mean, that's going to be individual, based on your goals, right? So if you have a weight loss goal, then you want to establish what is your total daily energy needs for maintenance. And that's best usually found out by tracking for a couple of weeks. Did I lose weight at the end of the 2 weeks? Did I gain weight or did I stay the same? Ideally, if you track for 2 weeks and stay the exact same, then you're eating at your body's maintenance level at this moment. And so from there, you want to take things down if your goal is to lose weight, it doesn't have, you don't want to go like 1,000 calories down, but 500 calories deficit is typically what I recommend after you have leptin signaling back on board, you're sleeping good, you have good energy. Okay, let's look at playing around with creating an energy deficit. But that's going to be individual. There's no online calculator that's going to give you exactly where your body is at. It's going to be a matter of let me just track for a couple of weeks and be really honest about it. Did I gain weight? Did I lose weight? Did I stay the same? Again, if you lost weight, then you're already eating in a deficit. Cool, keep going. Sometimes people lose weight just when they track because they're like more conscientious of what's going on. But that's really the best way to figure it out, other than getting into the blueprint and having us take a look at everything for you and giving you some recommendations and then being able to tweak them throughout the 6 weeks.
And if you know your overall calorie goal or caloric goal, you can always use one of the apps also to figure out the like actual breakdown of say, 80 grams of carbs or, 120 grams of carbs, whatever your percentage wise is, you can always use one of those apps. Otherwise, yes, if you know your percentage, you are able to kind of figure it out too. It's just a little bit more mathematical to end up and figure that. So apps are a great tool. Chronometer. I use MyFitnessPal myself just because I find it more user friendly. Do we have an opinion on using things like devices such as the Oura Ring? Wondering if it's on airplane mode, is it still affecting the body through the night?
I think the Oura Ring on airplane mode is the safest of most of them. When we're looking at non-native EMF, I think that, I mean, sometimes it can be helpful to see how you're sleeping, but I haven't worn one in like 3, 4 years just because I know if I've slept bad, I know if I haven't moved enough. And I'm someone who gets stressed out when I'm like constantly checking my data to make sure that I've hit some like ancillary goal. So yeah, it can be interesting feedback, but a lot of people that I've worked with also get really wrapped up in the numbers and this. I know Becky wears one. So to play devil's advocate, I know Becky really enjoys the feedback from hers, but I typically don't really like them very much.
Yeah. And I do feel as though that's also where it depends on what are you doing to also build your resiliency.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are bombarding yourself with a lot of this data, it's still a stress, right? So are you working on the nervous system? Are you working on, is that going to be a stress? Same thing with other tracking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to end up and be a stress, or how are you on the flip side of it? And so if you're balancing that and you're able to, maintain your lower level of stress, not that either one of us are sitting here saying, we don't have a stressful life. It's just, how do you balance it? And for Sarah, that was an additional layer. For me, I'm able to, still incorporate it and kind of follow those type of things. What signs should we look for? What signs should we look for that would indicate that we are not ready to skip dinner?
Trouble sleeping, easy to startle, irritable, those things, just like your nervous system is not really super regulated, that you can't go, let's say you have breakfast and then it's 11 o'clock and you start feeling dizzy, like you can't go long periods of time without feeling like shaky or hangry. That typically means you're not like fat adapted enough to start doing a dinner skip.
How to restore stomach acid?
Well, I mean, typically you're going to need to do a HCl protocol for a little while. I like the healthy gut protocol, and I trust Steve, and their products are really good. And if they end up not working for you, you can actually send them back and get a refund. But I've had a lot of people do an HCl protocol and then slowly wean off of it. And I was one of those people. I don't need to do it anymore. I haven't taken HCl in a really long time. And, but I did need to do it temporarily. And I've had that experience with a lot of clients as well. So sometimes it's a matter of giving your body that support and that signal while you work on all the other things that help to build a healthy terrain, and then slowly phasing it out.
And someone says, I've been low carb for a while, but broke it during the holidays since I didn't see much result with the A1C number. We've actually seen people that are low carb, keto carnivore that have increased their A1C. So that's where really optimizing and looking at yourself as an individual. But A1C is the question.
Well, A1C is like 90 days. So if it was just the holidays, then it hasn't even been 90 days yet. So you can't really.
Well, they broke it at the holidays because they weren't seeing a benefit to their
They weren't
A1C
seeing.
by being
Okay.
that.
I got it. Yeah. I actually, yeah, like Becky said, I have seen a lot of people have their A1C go up on carnivore because of what happens with stress hormones, and the body being in this state called gluconeogenesis. So we've talked a lot about having energy sources, fat and carbs as your energy sources. So this is where carnivore can play in, because a lot of people just go to extra protein and they don't even get enough fat. And so the body can get stressed out and you start to see the A1C going up as a result of that. So that's why I don't really love that approach as a first run for most people.
You reference mold. Do you recommend any specific tests to assess the toxin load?
I would recommend working with a practitioner that like Dr. John Kim. And then there's a home mold test that you can get. The functional medicine testing with mold can be subjective. Some of it I'm like, if you want a practitioner to specifically deal with mold and testing, I would go with Dr. John Kim, because he understands light biology, circadian biology, nervous system regulation, and he uses all these tools with his clients. But those tests are hit or miss, really. So I would test your home first. There's a dust test that you can get. I think it's testmyhome.com. But I would get a dust test, and I would make sure you're getting light exposure first, before you go spend money. Do the basics first before you go spend a lot of money on tests.
And can all of this help with gout?
Potentially. I mean, it depends on what's causing the gout, that's what's really important to understand, is what's actually causing that. But yes, technically it could.
The approach to align our bodies with natural rhythm of seasons like it was meant to be gave me a real light bulb moment. No pun intended. I have tried so many things over the years, and I am so excited to have found you, Sarah. Thank you. I feel like this is going to be life changing. You can feel it in your body when something makes sense. Signing off. Well, thanks.
Oh, very nice.
I'm still confused about the indoor lighting during the day. Do we keep a red lamp on all day and the phone should be red, or can we switch back to color and use overhead lighting during the day?
The issue with the overhead lighting is blue with no infrared. And so if you can keep a lamp on your desk that has an incandescent bulb, that's been shown to be very helpful to mitigate the artificial light with that. The indoor lighting is a big spike of blue with no red and no infrared. And that's the issue. That's what stresses out the mitochondria. So if you can keep a light bulb on your desk that's an incandescent bulb, a little lamp, that can be very helpful. If you have a little, I've got this little panel I keep on through the day, that can help opening up a window. As far as your phone screen, just be mindful if you need to see what's actually on your phone, which I do sometimes because I create content and things like that, then don't maybe do it outside, maybe wear yellow blue blockers or just don't do it for long periods of time. Your brain can handle little hits of blue light from phone and from overhead and stuff like that. It's just you don't want to be intentionally bathing in that if you can help it, So do what you can to offset it. Open a window, get a lamp with an incandescent bulb. I just did a post on that yesterday. And that little bit, and sit by a window. A little bit can go a long way.
And someone's asking, can we participate in the Bio-Individual Blueprint program if we work Monday through Friday? We may not be able to make the meeting. So there's 2 meetings a week, Cindy. It is a meeting on Monday,
Friday,
and a meeting on Friday, but they're recorded.
Yeah, everything's recorded, and you'll have the opportunity to submit questions in advance. So again, my kickoff will be on the 26th, and then I'll be there on the Friday meetings at 1:30. We'll get a new lesson that's stripped out every single week. That's like an hour-long lesson. And then you have the group that you can post in there anytime. And before the calls, typically what we'll do is we'll have people submit questions for the calls if they're not able to be there live. And then we'll post all the replays in the group as well.
And Corey, you ask about the maintenance calories on a TDEE calculator. If someone has done all of the things over a year, still can't get to maintenance without gaining fat, what are your thoughts? Can maintaining be 300 calories under? So a calculator doesn't take things into account.
Right. It's
an online calculator.
Out.
Yeah.
It's missing out on all the context that we talked about really in the webinar. And then your individual hormones, thyroid, leptin, all those things. If you're, your body has gone into an adaptive physiology state, the calculator doesn't know that. It just sees height, weight, activity level. Okay, cool. This is our calculation. Could be completely wrong, and on the flip side of that, sometimes people will do these energy calculators and end up under eating by following them because their body is more efficient than these calculators can understand. So that's why they're not always a great idea to try to figure out how much you should be eating.
And that's where taking it into account, because you can undereat and still gain weight. Mm-hmm. So talking about, the caloric aspect, you can undereat. So if your metabolism has downregulated and you are, under eating, it's going to hold on to everything it has because it's sensing the stress. Mm-hmm. So that has to be taken into account too. And again, that's where, working with the two of us comes into play because we can work with you on that. Mm-hmm. Jennifer asked, what if you use chocolate or cacao every day, whether it's chocolate protein powder or 70% chocolate squares or hot cocoa, but it's an everyday thing?
I mean, are you not meeting your goals? Are you feeling bad from it? Are you feeling jittery? Are you having trouble sleeping? Like, I think a little tiny bit of chocolate can fit for some people. But again, it's all like, is it causing you a problem? Do you feel like you're overdoing it? Do you feel addicted to it? Is it causing you mental anguish? I think that's the main question, because there's a way to make it fit in a healthy lifestyle. It just depends on the context and what your goals are.
Speaking of desert, that's where I live. We have a community garden where you have some input on what we plant. However, due to allergies in the fall, most of the veggies I'm allergic to, example, nightshade, squash, etc. What do you suggest? And can you really personalize for those with a long list of allergies?
That's typically there's a histamine issue going on, which means we need to support the gut. We need to support the liver. There's a lot. We need to support cellular hydration. That's another aspect that we can help with in the blueprint. But a lot of times, histamine can come down to hydration as well. And it's not necessarily just like drinking more water. It's a whole, like looking at a whole system. Um, so yeah, we can help with that. We can absolutely help with that and foods to eat in the meantime, but we also want to understand like why the body is doing that and how it can be helped as well.
What about oxalates in food, especially in root vegetables?
If you have a sensitivity to oxalates, then don't eat them. There's other options. A lot of the time, the people that have developed sensitivity to oxalates are people who are eating them year round in high amounts, So if you have a sensitivity to oxalates, then I would stick with more squashes, baked apples. There's tons of other foods you can eat that don't have oxalates in them. And then cooking the foods is going to do a great deal to reduce the issue of oxalates in the food as well. So where I see people having issues with oxalates is if they're eating handfuls of almonds or putting handfuls of spinach in the blender and eating that year round all the time. And that could be potentially an issue with eating large amounts of chocolate all the time, right? It's all context and person dependent. And a lot of the time, if you've had a lot of antibiotic use or you've had a lot of gut issues, you might be a little more susceptible to oxalate sensitivity. But there's definitely ways to do this approach and to eat healthfully and not include high oxalate foods as well.
Thoughts on primarily eating plant-based for cancer healing and prevention?
It's all contextual. I think that that's a great way to get your body into autophagy and into more of like a depleted state, a fasting state that you might want to do in a cancer approach. But what I've seen, and we have some actual members in our group that are cancer survivors, they did more of a ketogenic approach with more fasting rather than going to plant-based. So yeah.
My chat just like, is grayscale black and white on a phone void of all blue light? I have a harder time looking at a red scale on my phone, but black and white is great.
It's got blue light in it. If you have a hard time, I would just wear a pair of blue blockers. It could be too bright too. You might want to adjust the brightness. Yeah.
I have a good amount of natural light with windows and don't really use lights during the day. Should I be using full spectrum bulbs and have lights on during the day?
No, I don't think you need to buy a bunch of extra bulbs. If you have got good windows, you have good lighting. I'm sitting in here in my office in front of a window. I usually have a little lamp with an incandescent bulb, but the bulb blew out. So, just as much as your eyes need to see, you ideally want to be taking breaks to go outside to get full spectrum. There's not really a bulb that can do that, but if you've got a lot of windows and natural light, I wouldn't put an overhead light on really.
And D Morgan, I don't know what an OTT light is. This, what about an OTT light?
I don't know what that is.
I don't either.
Okay. Awesome.
Oh. Otherwise, that's the rest of the questions. Full spectrum light is what a OTT light.
Okay. Yeah, there's better LEDs. Some are better than others, but I don't have people really stress out on light bulbs just because it's, keep an incandescent bulb on your desk if you can and get outside and take natural light breaks, sit by a window. Those things are going to go a long way. All righty. Was that it?
Yep, that's all of them. Oh, sorry, TK. Is it okay to have red light therapy panel on all day?
Just don't shine it in your eyes, and you can keep it on the infrared setting. That's no problem. I keep the infrared setting on in my kitchen all day. And then I have the sauna space glow light that I keep on upstairs as well with the kids. That one's pretty nice.
Would it make sense to have the fire wave on the IF setting like you do if is it to mitigate phone and blue overhead lighting?
It's also to bring some infrared back into your environment because the big issue with the indoor spaces, there's infrared can't get through glass. And that long wavelength light is so important for mitochondrial health and metabolism. And so that's another reason why I keep the fire wave on the infrared only in the kitchen. And then I also have the sauna space bulb now in the living room that kind of keeps that room full of full spectrum infrared.
Why not red light therapy on the eyes all day when working? Is it okay to have a red light panel shining on your body all day?
I wouldn't. There is an upside down U-shaped curve with red light therapy. If you're trying to use it for therapeutic benefits, you want to do it if you're doing it on as a treatment. You only want to do that for a certain amount of time every day. I wouldn't keep a panel shining on me all the time just because that can actually trip that upside down U-shaped curve. I would just you can keep it on in the room and not have it actually on as a treatment, right? Keep it like a couple feet away from your body. I don't see a problem with that, but I wouldn't keep it like actually on my skin all the time because that can actually cause some oxidative stress.
What is the issue with stevia?
Just most artificial sweeteners are going to confuse leptin signaling. They're going to confuse the pancreas and confuse leptin signaling. And I look at things from the viewpoint of how can we create leptin sensitivity? Now, again, we're looking at gold standard versus I would rather you have a little bit of stevia than go out and eat a whole entire cake if it's going to save you, like I want people to come away from this with like, let's be reasonable and like let it fit into your life. Um, so that's my views on that, right? It's going to not be the best thing for your leptin, but if it's a choice between you having a little stevia and like eating a whole pound cake, let's just have the stevia and move on with our life.
And so what is your optimal sweetener of choice?
I don't usually use any sweeteners personally. Becky, what do you use? Do you use a sweetener?
I have a local source for honey. I mean, the bees literally are 10 miles from me. So I end up and I use a local honey. I've gone through, how they end up and do the whole spinning process and all of that. So I can see again the bees where they, are sourcing, right? Into where the final product is. And so I use a local honey for my sweetener of choice.
Awesome. That's what my husband uses too. We're in Georgia. So, okay, I'll get to a couple more and then it's three.
Perfect.
Red light panel on all day, but not facing you. It's fine. I mean, you're just bringing in infrared light into your space. So I don't have a problem with that really. I just wouldn't want you to have it on like on your body, like as a treatment, because that potentially could negate some of the benefits of red light therapy. Is a vegetarian diet okay long term, or is it better to? I don't think that personally, I don't think there's enough protein on a vegetarian diet unless you're including a lot of eggs. Um, Eggs are a great source of protein. Dairy is a good source of protein. You got to be really conscientious with that. And I would love it if they want to do vegetarian, also have seafood, but that's technically not vegetarian. But you're going to be missing out on a lot of amino acids that your brain and nervous system really need. So there are other nutritionists out there that support vegetarian diets and can help you piece in those missing building blocks, but I'm not one of them who specializes in that particular method. What about mushroom fruiting bodies? I don't know what that is. And no, I do not eat raw meat. Raw eggs, maybe. Dr. Sarah does, who is a friend of mine, but I really don't. She's all about the raw meat. I can't get down with that. Personally, it's just not something that's appealing to me at all, but she does that and swears by it. So not something I
Let's just say
teach or do.
I've done like steak tartare
Oh
and
yeah,
blue rare meat, but not a like every
a raw
meal.
diet. Sarah
Yeah.
does. Sarah does. And when I was pregnant, I wanted to eat raw. I was like craving raw meat. It was insane. So I would just cook it like a little bit. Um, yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll make sure I get the replay out. I'll just go ahead and do that now. And if anyone is interested in the blueprint, you're welcome to go ahead and just, you can email us at the email inbox if you have any more questions that I didn't answer here. And yeah. And that, Trish, is something I'm not familiar with, to be honest with you, but it doesn't sound like a bad thing. All right, everyone. Well, thank you. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.